Many times when we go into these difficult conversations, we just want to be out of them, right? But the only way out is through a lot of these conversations. And so when you go into it with the expectation that everyone's going to be heard and everyone's going to be respected and everyone's going to be honored and you're going to come to a solution, that's what you set up in your intention. And that's generally what happens. And sometimes you need to have more conversations. You've got to have follow-up conversations to that. And that's a beautiful thing because now you're both feeling safer in that. Hey there, Prosperity Seeker. Welcome to another episode of The Prosperity Approach. I'm your host, Allyson Chavez, and I'm so excited and thrilled that you've joined me today. But first, if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, be sure that you're following the podcast on your favorite app. And if you're watching this episode on YouTube right now, be sure that you've clicked that red subscribe button below and click the notification bell so you're notified when a new video is released. Today's topic is all about getting out of expectation and into clarifying conversations by leading with empowered feminine. This has been a thorn in my side for years and years and years. I think all of us tend to think we're really great communicators and we speak our voice and we share our opinion and we are strong and then the moment comes when we're in some sort of conflict or confrontation and I can only speak for myself, but I would find myself doing anything to get out of that confrontation or that fight or that argument or anything that caused any sort of upset. If you followed me for any length of time, you know that I'm a former people pleaser, and people pleasers don't like to upset the apple cart. And I, growing up, was the peacemaker in my house. So that was my role. So any kind of confrontation or fight or argument, I wanted nothing to do with. And I would agree with whatever people would say in the moment, mainly my family members, just to end the discomfort. And that doesn't help anybody, especially if you're wanting to use your voice, if you're wanting to be bold and unapologetic about using your voice, but not aggressive and not obnoxious and not in your face with it, but just holding really, really great boundaries. Well, in order to do that, you've got to learn how to handle conflict and confrontation and all of that. And I have found that as I have learned my voice more, as I have learned more about embracing my feminine in an empowered way, it's much easier to do that when we just tweak the perspective just a little bit. We're taught, that we've got these opposing energies, right? We're in feminine, we're in masculine, we're taught to lead in the masculine. And so as women who are powerful women, we're taught to either defy the masculine or comply with it. If you're a peacemaker like me, whatever you say. But really what we want is what I had heard described as alliance. We want to be in balance with the masculine. And too often we go into conversations in that masculine, we've got to fix this and we got to fix this now, instead of being in that empowered feminine where there's space here. And let's just get a handle on everything. Let's let everybody's voices be heard with nobody being wrong. And then let's see what we can create out of that. So I would fall down in conversations for a few reasons. First, I think we're taught, and I know we're taught, somebody has to be wrong, right? Somebody's got to be wrong in the conversation. So somebody has to clean up their act or whatever. And whoever wants to be wrong? Nobody ever wants to be made wrong. So there's where we go off the rails in the first. And then we don't know how to use our voice powerfully. We either overcompensate by being really abrasive, or we go the other direction and we're like, yes, whatever you say, just end the agony. All right. And, you don't want to upset the apple cart. I hated confrontation, as I said before. And I had a mentor who was talking about really leading with the feminine and being an empowered feminine. And she said to confront just means to face. And when you are that highest version of yourself, if you're showing up as the highest version of yourself, then you're just willing to face whatever it is that's coming up that doesn't feel comfortable to you. Well, okay, it took a little bit of the sting out of using the word confrontation if I just know what it means to face. But I was still absolutely filled with dread every time that I would have to have a conversation with somebody where they were, quote, in trouble, or I was, quote, in trouble, and somebody had to be wrong and somebody had to, do penance or whatever it is that was going on. And I still didn't like it. I still wanted to avoid it. But as you ascend to higher and higher levels of success, what I have found is that it requires greater and greater amounts of leadership. And leaders have to have those hard conversations. They have to have conversations that feel sticky and uncomfortable. But you can have these conversations where everybody leaves feeling better. So I was talking with a dear friend and a mastermind partner, and we were discussing this and about coming at it from the feminine. And she said, well, how about we get out of confrontation and we just get into clarification? Because you need to have clarity. You need to have a clarifying conversation about what's going on from their perspective and what's going on from your perspective. And then you can talk about what direction you're going to go after each of you has seen each other's perspective. And that settled something in me really, really quickly, that it's not a you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. It was just, hey, share with me your perspective. And I'm going to share with you my perspective. And then once we're on the same page, or we at least know what page each other is on, then we can decide what direction we're going to go. Are we going to go in a direction together, or are we going to go in separate directions? And that, I'm not kidding, I just felt all of this angst just melt away. It's so much easier. It's so much easier to approach it from that angle where nobody has to be wrong, because nobody's wrong. There are ways that it could have been handled better. Delivery could be better, but it really just helps us drop the defenses and put down our weapons right at the very beginning. And because God and the universe love us so much, and this was something that I really wanted to skill up in as a feminine leader, I've had some really great opportunities to do that very, very recently, both professionally and personally. And I'll tell you, I still get nerves before the call. I still had to, I make it a matter of prayer before I'm having a conversation with them. Any of those clarifying conversations, I'm praying for me. I'm praying for them. I also do what's called energetic connection. So I clear the energy between us and just pump this whole experience filled with love and with kindness and being able to see each other's point of view and hear each other and really have this respectful, beautiful experience that we're creating together, where we both feel uplifted at the end, where one of them isn't leaving feeling unheard or resentful or not honored or respected or anything like that. Because I have a real intention to be respectful of other people's perspectives. And I also am clear that I expect to be treated with that same amount of respect. And you don't start the conversation that way, but it's just something that you kind of go to with your intention of everything. I really want to see and hear where you're coming from so we can see where the disconnect was. And it's not about fixing. It's about just clarifying. It's getting clear on where we are and then creating what we want to create. Are we going to create something together, or are we just going to go our separate ways? It's so beautiful. When I had the opportunity to do this not too long ago, those walls that were up really, really high with the person that I was talking with. And so I started it with, why don't you share with me your perspective about what's going on and about what happened? And so she did. She just started to just unleash. And I really did appreciate that. But it was interesting because I found myself getting a little bit defensive, no, that's what this was. And then she was like, okay. And I was like, oh, okay, no, sorry. Keep talking. Tell me everything. Just let me know. Because I know that when emotions are high, and we've been triggered, there's lots of different laws in play, but the one that's in play the most is called the law of projection. So if I have an emotional reaction to your behavior or something that you've said to me, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. And it's a part of me that's still wounded that needs to be healed. And so I get to do my own work on myself. And so we had actually been mirrors for each other in this instance. And she was triggered by me and I was triggered by her. And I was like, oh, this has nothing to do with her. This has everything to do with me. And then I was able to just, we call it holding the space. And I know people make fun of that sometimes, but it really is just this beautiful, like, there's room here for everyone. There's room here for your opinion and perspective. There's room here for my opinion and perspective. And nobody has to be wrong about any of this. And then let's see if we can come to an agreement about the direction that we want to take. Like, let's just see how this unfolds rather than I got to get in here with my hammer and my nails and rip things apart and put things back together again. When we're wounded, we don't want that happening anyway, because we feel so exposed and it can still feel very raw. Another thing that I would say in having a clarifying conversation, I heard this many years ago when we were first skilling up in being parents, when Jeremy and I were learning how to parent. And one of the people that we were learning from said, never argue with a drunk or never try to reason with a drunk. And they said, when somebody else is drunk on emotion, you can't get through. So there's no sense in arguing. There's no sense in trying to reason with them until everybody calms down. And so when we have that moment of volatility in our emotions, it's really important to just kind of go to your separate corners and process, like just let the dust settle for just a minute, take some breaths. Take a weekend. When all of this came to be, it was on a weekend, and I was like, I don't have time for this. I know she doesn't have time for this, but let's each just sort of go through our own process and see where we're at, and then we can come together when we're in a more calm place, when we can see things a little bit more clearly. Hopefully, if we've gotten some sleep and we can sort of digest more what's going on. But when it's like raw, really volatile emotions in the moment, is not the time to have a clarifying conversation. It's when the most hurtful things are said. It's when walls go up even more. It's when wounds go even deeper. So if you're upset, don't be having a conversation with somebody when you're super upset. And likewise, if they're upset, like, give them a minute. All right. It's okay. Give them a minute. Give them some space. Another thing that is really important to do is to get out of expectation. I had a mentor once that said, expectation always leads to disappointment. And I was like, is this true? Does expectation lead to disappointment? And then as I thought about it, I was like, yeah, actually, because most of the time we have unvoiced expectations. So the other person doesn't even know what the expectation is that they're trying to live up to. And so we're completely disappointed about the way that they show up. And so first of all, it's not fair because they don't even know what playing field they're on, much less how to win this sort of game, because they don't know what the expectations are. Or they didn't agree to the expectation that you set on them. And so they're filled with resentment because they didn't have a voice. They didn't have a say in what the expectation was. Nobody wins when you're in expectation. Everyone wins when you're in agreement. And so when we've had the clarifying part of the conversation, here's your perspective. And I always start with their perspective, not mine. I always want to hear them first. And that, I believe, is very important because it actually helps me to set the tone of the conversation even more, because I let them have the floor first. Tell me your side of it. Tell me what you saw. Tell me what you felt. Just tell me your perspective instead of like you jumping in first. So I always ask for their perspective first and then give my perspective. So now we've got clarity. Now we've had a clarifying conversation. Now we're going to get into agreement rather than expectation. Well, from here on out, you need to toe the line. Okay, well, that's an expectation. That's not an agreement, unless the agreement is, hey, here's the line. Are you going to toe it? Yes. I will toe the line. Okay, then you're in agreement. But you got to get really clear about what towing the line is. So if we're going to meet somewhere in the middle, if that's the direction we want to go, we still want to go in a direction together, then we've got to get into agreement about what happens if something like this crops up again. How am I going to show up? How do you agree to show up? Or is this gone and we never speak of this again because it's settled? It's now we're letting the wound scab over, but we're not going to pick at the scab. We're not going to poke at the scab. We're still going to continue to heal, but we're not going to go back and reopen the wound. You get to just be in so much clarity and be so clear about what the agreements are. And you can do this personally. So important to do this with your spouse, to do this with your children, and professionally as well, with your clients, with your subordinates, with your team members, even with coworkers and with managers and your boss. Like it makes it so much more powerful. And then you're not in fear, and hopefully they're not in fear. And there's an understanding that's going on instead of just all of this, walking on eggshells experience in the workplace, because it doesn't need to be that way. One of the things that I have done when I felt like I've been walking on eggshells is just to say, hey, I've noticed this feeling and I feel like I'm tap dancing or I'm walking on eggshells, and this just isn't working for me because I feel like the rug's about to be taken out from under me, or my knees are going to get cut out from under me at any moment. And so can you help me understand what's going on? So that's a really great way to approach a conversation where behavior's happening that it's just not working for you anymore. And it's not this, you'd better change. It's just, hey, again, this isn't working for me. So will you please tell me your perspective? Like what's going on? It ends the passive aggressive nonsense that so many people get caught up in. It ends like the guessing game of where we are. And it just helps everybody show up at their highest version of themselves. And everyone is not only feeling empowered, but is powerful. So let's get back to the whole agreements part of empowering conversations and clarifying conversations. Everybody wins when you're in agreement. So you're very clear about what you're going to do moving forward. They're very clear about what they're going to do moving forward. And then if that person violates the agreement, or they start showing up in a different way, or like they didn't do what was agreed upon, you can have another clarifying conversation where no one is made wrong, but you can just say, hey, I know we talked about this recently, and this is what I agreed, and this is what you agreed to do or to not do. And I've kept my agreement, but I don't see you keeping your agreement. So tell me what's going on here. Were we not clear in the agreements? We were not clear in the boundaries? Like, help me see what's going on. And so it's not this accusatory, you'd better shape up or ship out kind of an experience. It's just, here's the boundary and it's getting crossed again. And so tell me what's going on so we can be clear in the agreement. It's such a relief to have these kind of conversations with people, and it leaves everyone feeling so much better if that's what they choose going out of it than they did coming into it. Now, something is very important to understand. You're not responsible for anybody's reaction to you. When you are coming from an empowered position, and when you're coming from that highest version of yourself that you are in the moment, when you're really wanting clarity, when you're really wanting to hear the other person and see their side of it, and you're really wanting to come to agreement moving forward, their experience is their experience. Their reaction is theirs. It's not yours. It's not your responsibility to make sure that their feelings aren't hurt. And again, like, this doesn't mean that you show up and you're nasty to them and then you're like, if your feelings are hurt, it's your problem. Then no, that's not the highest version of yourself that you're showing up as in that moment. But when you are just really clear on speaking what your truth is and what your perspective is, but you are clear that you're going to be bold, unapologetic, but very respectful and very clear in that. If they choose to be offended by that, it has nothing to do with you. And women have been taught to have this overdeveloped sense of responsibility for everybody else's experience and everybody else's feelings. It's why if you're a former people pleaser like I am, it's the mantra is don't hurt their feelings, don't hurt their feelings, don't hurt their feelings. And then you're just trying to get everybody to like you, and then they still don't like you. And you're pretzeling yourself and all this kind of inconvenience so nobody else is inconvenienced at all. and nobody else is held accountable, and you're holding yourself accountable for other people's feelings. And what you do is, first of all, you make yourself kind of God or the savior in that situation, and you're not. And it cuts off your own voice. You don't let yourself express what you're honestly feeling in a respectful way in that moment. And also, you rob the other person of responsibility for their own emotions and their own experience. You're doing that in the moment when you're trying to take responsibility for how they react to you. Their reaction to you has nothing to do with you. It's the law of projection. You could be holding up another mirror, is what they call it in the psychological world. You're either a lesson to somebody or a mirror for somebody, and somebody is either a lesson for you or a mirror for you. And we know that they're a mirror if we have some sort of emotional reaction to whatever their behavior is or whatever they've said to us. And whether positive or negative, it's still the law of projection. And I talked about this in a previous episode about universal law. So if you want to go back and revisit that, you're more than welcome to do that. But if they're having a reaction to you, it doesn't have anything to do with you. It has everything to do with the ways that they're wounded. It has everything to do with the lens through which they see the world. It has everything to do with the beliefs that they're running. It doesn't have anything to do with you. It's why there's that cute little saying that other people's opinions are none of your business. Like, their opinions about you and what other people think about you are none of your business, because they have nothing to do with you. And as long as you are continually growing yourself and skilling up in communication and in leading with powerful feminine energy and being true and authentically you, while giving others that same sort of mercy and that same sort of space that they get to find out who they are and show up as authentically them, then you start caring less and less and less about what people think of you, because you can see what's actually going on. Oh, I was a mirror. Oh, sometimes it's really uncomfortable to be a mirror for somebody. And sometimes it's really uncomfortable for people to be mirrors for us, but it's all about growth. It's all about greater amounts of joy. And I have found, without exception, when I start looking at these potentially difficult, uncomfortable conversations as something that will give us both clarity and a great direction, they are always a blessing. I always leave feeling better than when I came into the conversation. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't still have nerves right before then. It doesn't mean that my heart's not beating fast and my stomach's not twisting in on itself. That's from decades of conditioning, and that's still part of that. Like, I don't want anybody to feel bad through any of this. And so that's just a physiological response I have that to clarifying conversations, but it doesn't inhibit me from having these really beautiful conversations and leaving going, thank you, Lord. Thank you, God, for that beautiful experience, because this is designed to give you greater connection. It's designed to heal you. It's designed to give you greater joy. And there are many times when we go into these difficult conversations, we just want to be out of them, right? But the only way out is through a lot of these conversations. And so when you go into it with the expectation that everyone's going to be heard and everyone's going to be respected and everyone's going to be honored and you're going to come to a solution, that's what you set up in your intention. And that's generally what happens. And sometimes you need to have more conversations. You've got to have follow-up conversations to that. And that's a beautiful thing, because now you're both feeling safer in that. And you're understanding more that it's safe to be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. And that's actually a massive strength. And one of the characteristics of empowered feminine is that level of vulnerability. So while they're not my favorite things in the world to do, they are certainly very fulfilling, so much more fulfilling than they were in the past when I went with this bracing, put your defenses up. Oh no, I'm in trouble. I need to say I'm sorry. And I don't know why I need to say I'm sorry. Like it's none of that any longer. And make it a matter of prayer before you go. For sure, get your angels on your side. Oh my word, connect with God for sure. Get Get all of that so that you feel prepared and you feel powerful and you feel empowered in all of those wonderful things. But as you are wanting to have higher and higher levels of success with less and less struggle, we want that in our relationships as well. And this formula, clarifying conversations that lead to direction and agreement, I have found has taken so much struggle out of those difficult conversations. So I hope that helps you as well. If you want to stay connected, which I certainly hope you do, come join me over on Facebook. We're at the Prosperity Experience. I'm there every Wednesday doing live videos and sharing more prosperity tips. We call it Wednesday Wisdom, so that you can have more boots on the ground strategies that change your inner game so that your outer game can change as well. And you can get those higher and higher levels of success without struggle. And until next time, remember, prosperity becomes you. See you then.